Hey everyone, just a quick note. This is a podcast-style upload. The picture will stay the same throughout. Relax, focus on the story, and enjoy. Let me know in the comments if you want more like this.
Caroline Chittera's hands wouldn't stop trembling as she counted the crumpled bills on the greasy counter of the 24-hour diner. 340,001. It had taken her an entire week of graveyard shifts, smiling through exhaustion at drunk customers and cleaning up their messes, to earn this money. Every muscle in her body ached, and the fluorescent lights made her head pound, but she carefully folded the bills and tucked them into her jacket pocket. This was supposed to be for next month's rent. This was supposed to be the month she finally got ahead. The rain had started by the time she trudged up the 4 flights of stairs to their cramped apartment in Itaewon, each step feeling like she was climbing a mountain. The flickering hallway light cast strange shadows on the peeling wallpaper, and she could hear her father before she even reached the door. Marcus Chittera's voice boomed through the thin walls, slurred and angry, arguing with someone who wasn't there. Caroline's stomach twisted into knots. She knew that tone. She'd known it for years, ever since her mother had packed a single suitcase and walked out when Caroline was 14, begging her daughter to come with her. But Caroline had stayed. She'd stayed because she believed she could save him, because somewhere buried deep beneath the alcohol and rage was the father who used to read her bedtime stories in his rich Nigerian accent, mixing in Korean words her mother had taught them both. She pushed open the door to find Marcus sprawling on their sagging couch, an empty soju bottle dangling from his hand. The apartment reeked of alcohol and unwashed clothes. Overdue bills covered every surface like fallen leaves, red stamps screaming their urgency. Marcus's bloodshot eyes fixed on her, and Caroline felt her heart rate spike. "Where's my money?" he demanded, struggling to his feet. At 6'2", Marcus Chittera had once been an imposing figure, handsome and charismatic. Now he was a shambling wreck, his skin ashen, his once proud frame wasted by years of drinking. "Dad, I need to pay rent," Caroline said, keeping her voice steady even as her pulse hammered in her ears. "The landlord said if we're late again." "I don't give a damn what the landlord said." Marcus lurched toward her, and Caroline instinctively stepped back. "I'm your father. You live under my roof. That money is mine." "It's my money, Dad. I earned it." Caroline hated how small her voice sounded. She was 23 years old, and she still couldn't stand up to him without feeling like a frightened child. "I worked 60 hours this week. Please, just let me pay the rent, and then—" Marcus's hand shot out and grabbed her jacket, yanking her forward. The bills scattered across the floor like confetti. "You ungrateful bitch," he snarled, his breath hot and sour against her face. "I raised you. I put a roof over your head. Your whore mother ran off, but I stayed. And this is how you repay me." Caroline tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. This was familiar territory, the cycle they'd been trapped in for years. He'd grab her, shake her, maybe shove her against a wall. She'd cry, he'd eventually pass out, and the next morning he'd be filled with remorse, promising it would never happen again. Except it always happened again. The cycle just kept spinning, grinding her down a little more each time. But tonight was different. Tonight, when Caroline saw Marcus's other hand reaching for her, saw the look in his eyes that went beyond anger into something darker, something that made her skin crawl, she realized with horrifying clarity that they'd crossed a line they could never uncross. His hand slid down her arm in a way that no father's hand should touch a daughter, and Caroline's mind went blank with panic and rage. Her hand found the cast iron pan on the counter, the one her mother had left behind. It was heavy and solid, and when she swung it, connecting with Marcus's temple with a sickening thud, everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Marcus crumpled to the floor, blood trickling from his hairline. He was still breathing, still conscious, but stunned. Their eyes met, and in his gaze, Caroline saw the exact moment he realized what he'd been about to do. The horror and shame that flickered across his face would have been satisfying if Caroline hadn't been so terrified. She didn't wait to see if he'd get up. She didn't grab her phone because Marcus had smashed it 3 months ago in one of his rages, and she hadn't been able to afford a replacement. She didn't take her passport or her certificates or any of the few precious things she owned. Caroline Chittera simply ran. The Seoul streets were slick with rain, neon signs reflecting off puddles in dizzying arrays of color. Caroline ran without direction, her server's uniform soaked through, her lungs burning. She was a mixed-race woman in a country that still struggled with diversity, Nigerian and Korean blood flowing through her veins, but never quite belonging to either world. Too dark for Korea, not African enough for the Nigerian community. Always an outsider, always slightly wrong, like a puzzle piece that almost fit but not quite. The rain came down harder, and Caroline found herself in Gangnam, the wealthy district that might as well have been another planet compared to her shabby neighborhood. Designer boutiques lined the streets, and expensive cars glided past like sharks. She must have looked insane, a wild-eyed woman in a stained uniform stumbling through one of Seoul's most exclusive areas. People gave her wide berth, their expressions ranging from disgust to pity. That's when she saw it. The Azure Hall rose before her like a palace, all glass and steel and warm golden light spilling out into the rain. Through the windows, she could see people, beautiful people in evening gowns and tailored suits. It looked warm inside. It looked safe. Caroline's legs carried her forward before her brain could catch up, and suddenly she was pushing through the heavy doors, leaving a trail of rainwater on pristine marble floors. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to see how Caroline's desperate escape changes her life forever. The warmth hit her first, then the silence as every head turned to stare. Caroline froze, taking in the scene with growing horror. This wasn't just an upscale event. This was something else entirely. Roughly 30 women stood in elegant clusters throughout the grand hall, each one more stunning than the last. They wore designer gowns that probably cost more than Caroline made in a year. Diamonds glittered at throats and wrists. These women belonged here. Caroline, dripping and desperate, most certainly did not. "Miss, you can't be here," a security guard said, moving toward her with practiced efficiency. His hand reached for her arm, and Caroline flinched so hard she nearly fell. The guard paused, something like sympathy crossing his face, but his job was his job. Before he could escort her out, the energy in the room shifted dramatically. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and 3 men entered through a side door. The man in the center made Caroline's breath catch in her throat, and not in a pleasant way. Jin-su Kim moved like a predator, each step deliberate and controlled. He was young, perhaps early 30s, with sharp features that might have been handsome if not for the calculated coldness in his eyes. Those eyes swept the room, dismissing dozens of beautiful, accomplished women with barely a glance, until they landed on Caroline. Everything stopped. Jin-su's gaze pinned her in place like a butterfly on a board, and Caroline felt her fight-or-flight response screaming at her to run. But her legs wouldn't obey. She was trapped by the intensity of his stare, by the way he looked at her, not with the disgust or pity she'd seen on the streets, but with something else. Interest. Assessment. Like she was a problem he was solving in real time. "Director Yoon," Jin-su said without looking away from Caroline, his voice deep and measured. "What is this?" The man beside him, older and wearing wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "Sir, this is a candidate review for the succession position. As we discussed, we've assembled women from appropriate backgrounds." "I meant her." Jin-su gestured toward Caroline with his chin. "Who is she?" Director Yoon's lips pressed into a thin line. "No one, sir. Security is handling." "Leave her." Jin-su began walking toward Caroline, and the crowd melted away from his path. Up close, he was even more intimidating. He wasn't particularly tall, maybe 5'10", but he radiated an aura of controlled power that made Caroline want to curl into herself. "What's your name?" "Caroline," she whispered, then cleared her throat and tried again. "Caroline Chitara." "Caroline Chitara," Jin-su repeated, as if testing how her name felt in his mouth. "What are you running from?" The question was so direct, so cutting, that Caroline's defenses crumbled. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was trauma. Maybe it was the way he asked it, as if he already knew the answer and was just giving her permission to speak it aloud. "My father," she said. Something flickered in Jin-su's eyes. Not sympathy, exactly. Recognition. "What are you running toward?" Caroline opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no answer. She'd been so focused on escape that she hadn't thought about destination. The silence stretched between them, heavy with truth. "I don't know," she finally admitted. Jin-su nodded as if she'd confirmed something important. "Would you trade fear for purpose?" "What kind of purpose?" Caroline asked, and she saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Almost a smile. Almost. Jin-su turned to face the room, addressing the assembled women. "Thank you all for coming. This selection is complete. My assistant will see you out and ensure you're compensated for your time." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Women who'd been statuesque and composed moments before erupted into protests. A tall woman in a red gown stepped forward, her face flushed with indignation. "You can't be serious," she said. "I'm a professor at Seoul National University. My family has 3 generations of business leadership. She's nobody. Look at her. She's damaged goods, completely inappropriate for her. She's the only one who answered honestly." Jin-su cut her off, his voice like a blade. The room fell silent again. Everyone else gave me the answers they thought I wanted to hear. She gave me the truth. That's worth more than all your degrees and pedigrees combined. Director Yoon was already ushering the protesting women out, his assistants moving with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, the grand hall was empty except for Caroline, Jin-su, Director Yoon, and a handful of security personnel positioned at strategic points around the room. "Come," Jin-su said to Caroline, not waiting to see if she'd follow. Caroline's rational mind screamed at her to refuse, to walk out those doors and take her chances on the streets. But her rational mind had gotten her exactly nowhere. Her rational mind had kept her trapped with Marcus for 9 years, hoping and praying and trying to fix something that was fundamentally broken. So Caroline Chitara, dripping rainwater and trailing her old life behind her like a discarded skin, followed the Wolf of Seoul into the unknown. The elevator ride down seemed impossible. They descended for so long that Caroline wondered if they were heading to the center of the earth. Director Yoon stood beside Jin-su, his expression carefully neutral, while Caroline tried not to visibly shake. The elevator was all mirrors and chrome, and she caught glimpses of herself between the 2 men. She looked feral, hair wild, eyes too wide, a cornered animal. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "The fortress," Director Yoon answered when Jin-su remained silent. "Mr. Kim's primary residence and operational headquarters. It exists beneath Seoul, in spaces the city forgot about decades ago. Mr. Kim controls significant interests across multiple sectors: real estate, technology, entertainment, political consulting. This is not traditional organized crime, Miss Chitara. This is an alternative power structure." The casual way Director Yoon described Jin-su's empire made Caroline's head spin. The elevator doors opened onto a scene that defied belief. The fortress spread out before her like an underground city, all sleek corridors and hidden rooms. The lighting was soft and warm, nothing like the harsh fluorescence of her apartment. Everything was clean, expensive, and slightly surreal. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past closed doors that Caroline didn't dare ask about. Finally, they reached a medical wing that looked more advanced than most hospitals. A woman in scrubs appeared, her smile kind but professional. "Miss Chitara, I'm Dr. Park. Let's get you cleaned up and checked out, shall we?" Caroline looked at Jin-su, who nodded once. "You're safe here. No one can touch you without my permission, and I'm not giving it. Rest. We'll talk in the morning." Then he was gone, leaving Caroline in the capable hands of Dr. Park, who treated her scraped knees and bruised wrists with gentle efficiency. The doctor didn't ask questions, which Caroline appreciated more than she could express. After the examination, she was led to a room that made her want to cry. It wasn't just bigger than her apartment. It was nicer than anywhere Caroline had ever been. A king-sized bed dominated the space, piled high with pillows and covered in blankets that looked obscenely soft. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed an artificial sky, some kind of advanced projection that mimicked sunset. There was a bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in, a closet, a sitting area. It was the kind of room Caroline had seen in movies and magazines, never imagining she'd actually set foot in one. She stood in the middle of the room, still dripping, and finally let herself fall apart. The sobs came from somewhere deep and primal, years of fear and frustration and grief pouring out of her. She cried for the father she'd lost to alcohol long before tonight. She cried for the mother who'd left her behind. She cried for the girl she'd been, who'd given up a university scholarship to work double shifts at a diner. She cried until there was nothing left inside her but emptiness and exhaustion. Then Caroline Chitara stripped off her wet clothes, stepped into that enormous tub, and washed away the old life that had nearly destroyed her. Don't forget to comment below what you think Caroline should do next. And hit that subscribe button to follow this incredible journey. Morning came gently, filtered through those artificial windows that now showed a perfect dawn. Caroline woke in the most comfortable bed she'd ever slept in, momentarily disoriented. Then memory crashed back, and she sat up so fast her head spun. Last night had actually happened. She'd actually hit her father and run away. She'd actually crashed some kind of exclusive event and caught the attention of Seoul's most dangerous man. The reality of her situation settled over Caroline like a weighted blanket. She had no phone, no money, no identification. She didn't even know where in Seoul she was. She was completely at Jin-su Kim's mercy, and she had no idea what he wanted from her. A knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Chitara? May I come in?" Caroline wrapped herself in one of the plush robes hanging in the bathroom and opened the door to find an elegant woman in her 50s carrying a rolling cart laden with food. The breakfast spread was absurd: fresh fruit, Korean dishes, Western options, pastries, 3 kinds of juice. It was more food than Caroline usually ate in a week. "Mr. Kim thought you might be hungry," the woman said, setting up the cart by the windows. "There are also clothes in your closet, all in your size." Mr. Kim was quite specific about the measurements. That should have been comforting. Instead, it was deeply unsettling. Caroline's exact size. How did Jin-su know her measurements? Had someone measured her while she slept? The thought made her skin crawl. The woman must have seen the fear on Caroline's face because her expression softened. "Mr. Kim has excellent visual assessment skills, Miss Chitara. It's one of his talents. He looked at you for perhaps 30 seconds and knew everything about your physical dimensions. It's unnerving, I know. But there was no invasion of your privacy." After the woman left, Caroline approached the closet with trepidation. Inside hung an array of clothes that made her breath catch. Not evening gowns or anything ostentatious. Comfortable clothes. Soft pants, quality shirts, a few dresses that were elegant without being flashy. Everything was in colors that suited her complexion, styles that matched her aesthetic. It was like someone had crawled inside her head and pulled out her ideal wardrobe. She was dressed and halfway through breakfast, marveling at the fact that the eggs were perfectly cooked and the fruit was fresh, when Jin-su Kim walked into her room without knocking. Caroline jumped up, nearly knocking over her juice. "You can't just walk in here." "It's my building," Jin-su said mildly, but he paused at the threshold. "Would you prefer I knock?" "Yes." "Noted." He entered anyway, moving to the windows and looking out at the artificial sky with his hands clasped behind his back. In daylight, or what passed for it in this underground kingdom, Caroline could see him more clearly. He wore a simple black suit tailored to perfection, his hair styled back from his face. He was handsome, she supposed, in a dangerous way. Like a knife, beautiful but deadly. "We need to discuss why you're here," Jin-su said. "I don't know why I'm here," Caroline admitted. "You brought me here. I brought you here because you're useful to me." Jin-su turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I need an heir. Not through marriage, which would create complicated political alliances and expectations. Not through an existing relationship, which would give the mother too much leverage. I need someone smart, resilient, and unmotivated by power or wealth. Someone who has no ambition to control what I've built." Caroline's stomach dropped. "You want me to have your baby?" "Via IVF, Jin-su clarified, as if that made it better. "Clinical, controlled, safe. You would live here during the pregnancy, receive the best medical care available. After the birth, you would have a choice. Stay involved in the child's life as much or as little as you wish, with full financial support. Or leave with enough money to start whatever life you want, anywhere in the world." The casual way he laid out this insane proposition made Caroline's head spin. "Why would you choose me? I'm nobody. I have nothing." "Exactly." Jin-su moved closer, his gaze intense. "Everyone else I might choose would have an agenda. Family connections, business interests, social climbing. You have none of that. You're a blank slate." "I'm a person," Caroline snapped, anger cutting through her shock. "Not a blank slate. Not a useful tool. A person with thoughts and feelings and—" "I know," Jin-su interrupted quietly. "That's why I'm asking, not telling. That's why there's a contract, negotiable terms, and the option to walk away right now if this doesn't interest you." Caroline sank back into her chair, her mind racing. This was insane. Completely, utterly insane. But what was her alternative? Go back to Marcus? Sleep on the streets? She had no friends close enough to take her in. No family except a mother who'd made it clear Caroline wasn't her priority. She had nothing and no one. "I have questions," she said slowly. Jin-su nodded. "Ask. Why not choose someone from your world? Someone sophisticated and educated and—" "Because sophistication is performance, and I need authenticity. Because education doesn't guarantee character, and I need someone with integrity. Because everyone in my world wants something from me, and I need someone who wants nothing." That was fair, Caroline supposed. "What happens to my father?" Something flickered across Jin-su's face. I already have people watching him. He's been admitted to a hospital for treatment of his head wound, which they're attributing to a fall. He's told them he lives alone. He hasn't reported you missing. The relief Caroline felt was immediately chased by guilt. Marcus was hurt because of her. But he'd also tried to. She couldn't even finish the thought. I want him in a rehab facility. Far away from Seoul. The best one available. Jin-su raised an eyebrow. You want to help the man who hurt you? I want to help the man he used to be before alcohol destroyed him, Caroline corrected. That person deserves one more chance. Done. Jin-su said it so simply, as if moving people across the country and into expensive facilities was as easy as ordering coffee. What else? If I do this, I want education opportunities. I gave up a scholarship to support my father. I want to finish my degree. Caroline's voice grew stronger as she spoke. And I want a voice in this child's future. Not just for 9 months. I won't give birth and disappear like I never mattered. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it as a parent, not an incubator. For the first time, Jin-su smiled. It transformed his face, making him look younger and almost approachable. You're negotiating. Good. I was worried you'd just accept whatever I offered. Why would that worry you? Because I need someone strong enough to raise my child. Someone who won't be pushed around. If you can't stand up to me, you can't stand up for my heir. Jin-su pulled a tablet from his jacket and made notes. University enrollment, full tuition. Parental rights, shared custody if you choose to be involved. Rehab for your father. What else? Caroline's mind was spinning. This was happening. This was actually happening. What if I refuse? Then you walk away right now. I'll help you start over elsewhere. New identity if you want it, enough money to get established, no strings attached. Jin-su met her eyes steadily. I'm not your father, Caroline. I don't trap people. Everyone in the fortress is here by choice. The comparison to Marcus was like a slap, but also oddly reassuring. Caroline looked around the beautiful room, thought about her cramped apartment and endless bills and the fear that had been her constant companion. She thought about 9 months of safety, of being protected and cared for. She thought about a child who would never know the kind of fear she'd lived with. I need to see the contract, she said. Jin-su's smile widened. Excellent answer. The contract was surprisingly fair, filled with contingencies that protected both parties. Caroline read every word while Jin-su waited patiently, answering her questions without condescension. The medical procedures were outlined in clinical detail. The financial arrangements were generous. The custody agreements were flexible. There was even a clause about what would happen if Caroline fell in love with someone else during or after the pregnancy. This says I'm free to have relationships, Caroline noted. You're not my prisoner, Jin-su said. You're the mother of my child. Those are different things. Caroline picked up the pen, her hand hovering over the signature line. This was the moment. This was the choice that would change everything. She thought about her mother, who'd run away and never looked back. She thought about Marcus, drowning in bottles and regret. She thought about the girl she'd been yesterday, trapped and terrified and certain she'd never escape. Then Caroline Chittera signed her name with a flourish and chose a different kind of future. The first weeks in the fortress were surreal. Caroline went through medical procedures that were clinical but respectful, doctors explaining every step and asking permission for each test. She explored the underground complex, discovering a library that rivaled university collections, a garden where something magical with lights and hydroponics mimicked sunshine, and training facilities where dangerous-looking people practiced even more dangerous-looking skills. Director Yoon enrolled her in online university courses, and Caroline dove into psychology and business classes with the hunger of someone who'd been denied education for too long. She studied in the library, surrounded by books and silence, occasionally catching glimpses of Jin-su through glass walls as he conducted business. He was always working, always surrounded by people who looked at him with a mixture of respect and fear. Their interactions were brief and awkward. Jin-su would appear in corridors or the garden, ask if she was well, receive her confirmation, and disappear again. He was polite, distant, treating her like a valued employee rather than someone carrying his child. Caroline told herself that was fine. This was a business arrangement. Personal feelings weren't part of the deal. Then the pregnancy test came back positive, and everything shifted. Caroline was alone in the garden when Dr. Park called with the news. She stood among the artificial flowers and real vegetables, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach, feeling the weight of the life beginning inside her. Terror and wonder warred in her chest. She was going to be a mother. She was 23 years old, living in an underground fortress owned by a crime lord, and she was going to be a mother. Congratulations. Caroline spun to find Jin-su standing at the garden entrance. He looked uncomfortable, his usual confidence wavering. Dr. Park informed me. How do you feel? Terrified, Caroline admitted. Excited. Confused. All of it at once. Jin-su approached slowly, like he was afraid of spooking her. They stood on opposite sides of a raised garden bed filled with tomato plants. May I sit? There was a bench nearby, and they perched on opposite ends, a careful distance between them. Caroline studied Jin-su's profile, trying to understand this man who'd upended her entire life. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. Do you always get what you want? Jin-su considered the question seriously. No, but I've learned to want only what's necessary. Is that lonely? The question clearly caught him off guard. Jin-su turned to look at her fully, and Caroline saw past his careful control to something raw underneath. Exceptionally. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Caroline felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the careful walls she'd built around herself. They were both alone, she realized. Both trapped by different circumstances. Both trying to survive in a world that hadn't been kind to either of them. Thank you, Jin-su said suddenly. For what? For giving me a chance to be a father. For giving my child a chance at something better than what I had. He looked down at his hands, and Caroline noticed for the first time that his knuckles were scarred. My father was a monster. He built an empire on corruption and violence. My mother was his assistant, and he had her killed when I was 10 years old because she knew too much. I inherited this empire at 24, and I had to become ruthless to survive. I've done things I'm not proud of, but I've tried to be smarter rather than more violent. I've tried to be better than what came before. Caroline's heart ached at the picture Jin-su painted. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know what your child comes from. What's in their blood? Jin-su's expression was bleak. You should know what you've agreed to. I come from an alcoholic who abused me, Caroline said quietly. My mother abandoned me because I wasn't worth staying for. We all come from something broken, Jin-su. It's what we choose to do with those pieces that matters. Jin-su looked at her with something like wonder, as if she'd said something profound instead of simply true. They sat in silence, watching fake sun play across real vegetables, two damaged people building something new from the wreckage of their pasts. If you're invested in Caroline and Jin-su's journey, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The second trimester brought relief from constant nausea and a return of Caroline's energy. She threw herself into her studies, video chatting with professors and writing papers that challenged everything she thought she knew about human behavior. The fortress became less like a prison and more like a sanctuary. She learned the rhythms of the place, the changing of shifts, the quiet hours when Jin-su disappeared to whatever meetings ran his empire. And slowly, carefully, Jin-su started visiting her in the evenings. It began as checking on the air, official visits where he'd ask about doctor appointments and dietary needs. But somehow those visits stretched longer, evolving from duty into something else. They'd sit in the library or the garden and they'd talk. About everything. About nothing. About the lives they'd lived and the future they were building. Caroline learned that Jin-su's father had been a corrupt politician who'd used his government position to build a shadow empire. That his mother had been young and idealistic, believing she could change the man she worked for. That Jin-su had watched his father order his mother's death and had been powerless to stop it. He made me watch, Jin-su said one evening, his voice distant. They were in the library, and rain drummed against the building somewhere far above them. Said I needed to learn that loyalty to power mattered more than love. That attachments made you weak. Caroline's hand found his without conscious thought. Jin-su stared at their joined hands, as if he'd never seen such a thing before. He was wrong, Caroline said firmly. Attachments make you human. It's power without attachment that makes you a monster. Jin-su told her about inheriting the empire at 24, thrust into a world of sharks who'd sensed weakness and circled accordingly. He'd had to prove himself ruthless enough to survive, making examples of those who challenged him. He'd consolidated power, not through increased violence, but through superior intelligence, building legitimate businesses alongside the shadows. I'm not clean, he said bluntly. I never will be. But I've tried to reduce harm. The fortress employs hundreds of people who have nowhere else to go. We run rehabilitation programs, job training, protection for people escaping dangerous situations. It's not redemption, but it's something. In turn, Caroline told Jin-su about her mother, about the night she'd begged 14-year-old Caroline to leave with her. She said Marcus was going to destroy himself and take anyone nearby down with him. She said I had to choose, but I couldn't abandon him. I kept thinking if I just tried hard enough, loved him enough, I could fix him. You can't fix people, Jin-su said gently. They have to choose to fix themselves. I know that now. Caroline looked down at her growing belly, where their daughter was becoming more real every day. I won't make that mistake with her. I won't teach her that love means sacrificing yourself. I'll teach her that love means building something strong enough to support both people. Jin-su's expression did something complicated. You're going to be a good mother. We're going to be good parents, Caroline corrected. There's a difference. The shift happened slowly, like ice melting. Jin-su's evening visits became the highlight of Caroline's days. She found herself listening for his footsteps, watching the clock, anticipating their conversations. They debated philosophy and politics, argued about books, laughed at stupid things. Jin-su had a dry sense of humor that caught Caroline off guard, making her snort juice through her nose and sending him into rare, unguarded laughter. One evening in her 6th month, the baby kicked hard enough that Caroline gasped. Jin-su, who'd been reading beside her on the library couch, immediately tensed. What's wrong? Should I call Dr. Park? No, she's just here. Caroline pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the little flutter of movement. Their daughter, active and strong. Do you want to feel? Jin-su froze. You don't have to, Caroline said quickly, realizing she'd overstepped. This was still a business arrangement. She was still just. Jin-su's hand settled on her belly so gently it was barely pressure. They both waited, breathing held, until the baby kicked again directly into his palm. Jin-su's face transformed, wonder replacing his usual careful control. That's my daughter? His voice cracked on the last word. Our daughter, Caroline whispered. There's a difference. Jin-su looked at her, his hand still on her stomach, and Caroline saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes. Somewhere along the way, they'd stopped being business partners and started being something else. Something neither of them had names for. Something that terrified them both. The moment shattered when Jin-su's phone buzzed. He pulled away, expression shuddering. I need to handle something. He was gone before Caroline could respond, leaving her alone with her racing heart and the realization that she'd fallen in love with Seoul's most dangerous man. Drop a comment if you think Caroline and Jin-su belong together. And don't forget to subscribe. The confrontation with Marcus came in Caroline's 7th month, when her belly was unmistakable and her emotional armor was thin. She was in the garden, talking to her daughter, when alarms began blaring throughout the fortress. Security personnel materialized from nowhere, moving with military precision. Caroline's heart lurched into her throat. Director Yoon appeared, his expression grim. Miss Chitara, there's a situation at the main gates. Your father has somehow located this facility. He's brought reporters, claiming Mr. Kim has kidnapped you. Caroline's blood ran cold. Of course Marcus had found her. Of course he'd brought media. This was exactly the kind of manipulative stunt he'd pull, painting himself as the concerned father while destroying everything Caroline had built. Where's Jin-su? On his way. But Miss Chitara, you don't have to. Take me to the gates. Director Yoon looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Caroline's face stopped him. They took an elevator Caroline had never used, ascending to a ground-level entrance she hadn't known existed. Through security monitors, she could see Marcus standing before a crowd of reporters, playing his part perfectly. He looked sober, cleaned up, concerned. The loving father whose daughter had been stolen by a criminal. Jin-su appeared beside her, his presence solid and steadying. I can handle this. You don't have to. He's my monster, Caroline interrupted. I'm handling it. Caroline. Jin-su caught her arm gently. His eyes searched hers. I could make him disappear. Permanently. It would be easy. The offer was terrifying in its sincerity. Jin-su would kill Marcus for her if she asked. Would erase him from existence without hesitation. The old Caroline, the one who'd spent 9 years being ground down by fear and obligation, might have been tempted. No, she said firmly. Violence is his answer. It's not mine. Something blazed in Jin-su's eyes. Pride, maybe. Or love. Then we do this your way. But I'm going with you. They walked out together, Caroline heavily pregnant and Jin-su radiating controlled menace. The reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, questions flying. Marcus's face when he saw Caroline went through several emotions. Relief, confusion, then calculation when he noticed Jin-su. Caroline. Marcus pushed through the reporters, arms outstretched. Thank God you're safe. This man has been holding you. Stop. Caroline's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The reporters fell silent, scenting better drama. Nobody has held me anywhere, Marcus. I ran from you. I chose to leave. Marcus's mask of concern slipped. Baby girl, I know I made mistakes, but I'm your father. I raised you. You owe me. I owe you nothing. Caroline's voice shook with rage that had been building for 9 years. You want to do this here? Fine. Let's tell everyone the truth. Tell them about the drinking. About the violence. About coming home drunk and hitting me. Tell them about the night I ran, Marcus. Tell them what you tried to do that made me grab a pan and defend myself. The color drained from Marcus's face. Several reporters gasped, recalculating the story in real time. I don't know what you think. You tried to sell me to loan sharks. Caroline's voice broke. 3 months before I left, you promised them you'd hand me over as collateral for your debts. Don't you dare stand here and play the victim when you were the one who tried to trade your daughter for drinking money. Marcus's facade crumbled. Without it, he looked old and pathetic and small. Caroline, I was desperate. I didn't mean. You never mean it, Caroline said, and her voice was thick with grief now. That's the problem, Dad. You never mean any of it, but you keep doing it anyway. And I kept staying, kept trying to save you, until you finally crossed a line we couldn't uncross. She turned to Jin-su, who'd been watching the exchange with hawk-like intensity. Send him to the best rehab facility in Korea. Not for him. For the man he used to be, before alcohol destroyed everything good in him. That person deserves one more chance. Caroline. Marcus started, but she cut him off. I'm giving you this opportunity because I'm not you, Dad. I'm better than what you tried to make me. But if you waste this chance, if you come looking for me again, I won't stop Jin-su from protecting me. Do you understand? Marcus looked at Jin-su, seemed to measure the promise of violence there, and nodded shakily. Jin-su gestured to his security team. Take Mr. Chitara to Facility 17. Maximum care, no visitors, no contact with his daughter unless she initiates it. If he leaves, he's on his own. The reporters were already filing stories, their original narrative completely flipped. As security escorted Marcus away, he looked back at Caroline once. She didn't wave, didn't cry, didn't give him anything more than she already had. When they were alone in the elevator descending back to the fortress, Caroline finally broke. 9 years of fear and guilt and anger poured out of her in wrenching sobs. Jin-su pulled her against his chest, his arms careful around her pregnant belly, and just held her. He didn't offer platitudes or try to fix anything. He just held her while she grieved the father she'd lost long ago and the girl she'd been who'd tried so hard to save him. You were remarkable, Jin-su murmured into her hair. Showing him mercy he doesn't deserve takes more strength than having him removed. I don't have that kind of strength. Yes, you do, Caroline said against his shirt. You chose to help me instead of using me. You chose to negotiate instead of forcing me. You're stronger than you think. Jin-su's arms tightened around her, and Caroline felt his chest hitch with something that might have been tears. They stood in that elevator, 2 broken people holding each other together, and something fundamental shifted between them. The walls they'd both been maintaining crumbled, leaving them raw and exposed and terrified. I don't know how to do this, Jin-su whispered. Do what? Care about someone more than I care about control. You're changing everything, Caroline. You and our daughter. I don't know who I am without power and distance. Caroline pulled back to look at his face. Then figure it out. We have time. Do we? Jin-su's hand came up to cup her face. Because in 2 months you give birth, and then you have a choice. Stay or go. And I don't know how to ask you to stay without it sounding like another contract negotiation. Then don't negotiate, Caroline said. Just be honest. What do you want? Jin-su's thumb brushed her cheekbone. I want you to stay. Not because of our daughter. Not because of any agreement. I want you to stay because being near you makes me want to be better than what my father made me. Because your voice is the last thing I want to hear before sleeping and the first thing I want to hear waking up. Because somewhere in these months, you've become essential to me, and I don't know how to function without you anymore. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and terrifying. Caroline's heart hammered against her ribs. That's dangerous territory, she managed. I know. We could hurt each other. This could end badly. I know. I'm falling in love with you, Caroline whispered. And I don't know if that's real or just hormones and gratitude and… Jin-su kissed her. It was gentle and desperate and perfect, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. I've been in love with you since you negotiated your contract, he said. Since you demanded a voice for our child and mercy for your father. Since you showed me that strength doesn't have to mean cruelty. Caroline laughed through fresh tears. We're idiots. We're having a baby together, and we're just now figuring this out. Exceptionally poor timing, Jin-su agreed, smiling against her lips. The elevator reached the fortress, doors opening on their underground kingdom. Caroline took Jin-su's hand, their fingers interlacing naturally, and they walked toward an uncertain future together. Her water broke 3 weeks later at 2 a.m, and Caroline had never been so terrified in her life. Jin-su, who faced down criminal organizations and corrupt politicians without flinching, went completely white. He carried Caroline to the medical wing like she might shatter, barking orders at Dr. Park while trying to hide his panic. You're supposed to be calm. Caroline gasped between contractions. I'm very calm, Jin-su lied, his hand crushing hers. Labor was brutal and beautiful and endless. Caroline screamed and cried and threatened to murder Jin-su for doing this to her, while he apologized and held her hand and looked like he might pass out. Dr. Park handled both of them with infinite patience, coaching Caroline through contractions and occasionally reminding Jin-su to breathe. I can see her head, Dr. Park announced. Caroline, one more push. The pain was transcendent, beyond anything Caroline had imagined, and then suddenly it was over. A baby's cry filled the room, angry and strong, and Caroline collapsed back against the pillows. Dr. Park worked quickly, cleaning and checking, then placed a tiny bundle on Caroline's chest. Their daughter was perfect. Impossibly small and impossibly perfect, with a shock of dark hair and skin that blended Caroline's Nigerian heritage with Jin-su's Korean features. She was still crying, little fists waving, and Caroline fell completely in love. Hi, baby girl, Caroline whispered, tears streaming down her face. Hi, Jiwoo. Jin-su, who'd been frozen beside the bed, finally moved. He reached out with one shaking hand, touching their daughter's tiny fist. Jiwoo's fingers immediately wrapped around his, and something in Jin-su's expression broke open. Tears fell freely down his face as he looked at this tiny person they'd created. She's perfect, he managed. Caroline, she's perfect. Dr. Park helped Jin-su cut the cord, then handed him Jiwoo so Caroline could rest. Jin-su held his daughter like she was made of glass, his entire body rigid with fear of hurting her. But Jiwoo just yawned, apparently unbothered by her father's terror, and settled against his chest. I'm so sorry, Jin-su whispered to the baby. I'm so sorry for what you've inherited, for the empire and the violence and everything I can't undo. But I promise you'll never face what I faced. I promise you'll be safe. I promise you'll be loved. I promise. Caroline watched her dangerous crime lord cry over their daughter and knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. All those months ago, running through rain-soaked streets with no destination, she'd stumbled into the Azure Hall. She'd thought she was looking for shelter from a storm, but she'd found something else entirely. 2 weeks later, Caroline sat in the garden with Jiwoo sleeping against her chest. Recovery had been hard, and learning to be a mother was harder, but Jiwoo was worth every moment of exhaustion and uncertainty. She was a good baby, alert and curious, watching the world with dark eyes that seemed to take everything in. Jin-su appeared in the garden doorway, and Caroline's heart did its usual ridiculous flip. He'd been transformed by fatherhood, softer around the edges but somehow more intimidating in his protectiveness. Anyone who looked at Jiwoo wrong would probably disappear. It was terrifying and oddly sweet. We need to talk about your choice, Jin-su said, settling beside her on the bench. The contract. Caroline had almost forgotten about it in the chaos of new motherhood. According to their agreement, she could leave now if she wanted. Take Jiwoo and go, or leave Jiwoo here and disappear. She had options. I'm staying, Caroline said simply. Jin-su exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. But not as an employee. Not as the mother of my heir. As my partner. Are you negotiating with me, Jin-su? Yes. He turned to face her fully. I want to renegotiate everything. I want you to finish your degree, which you're already doing beautifully. I want you as an equal parent to Jiwoo. And I want your help reforming some of my business practices. You see things I don't. You understand people's pain in ways I never learned. I need that perspective. Caroline raised an eyebrow. You want to give me power? I want to share power. There's a difference. Jin-su smiled slightly. You've changed me, Caroline. Made me question things I accepted as necessary. I want to use the fortress for more than just survival. I want to help people the way you helped your father, giving them chances they don't deserve, but might actually use. That's a big change. I know, but you were right. Strength doesn't have to mean cruelty. Power doesn't have to mean isolation. I can be better. Jin-su reached for her hand. We can be better together. Caroline looked down at Ji-woo, sleeping peacefully against her chest. Their daughter would grow up in this underground kingdom, surrounded by danger and power. But she'd also grow up surrounded by love and people willing to change for her. That had to count for something. Okay, Caroline said. But I have conditions. Always. Jin-su smiled. What are they? I want programs for vulnerable youth, kids like I was. Job training, housing assistance, education support. I want to use your resources to help people who have nothing. Done. I want transparency about your business. I won't be involved in anything illegal, but I won't be kept ignorant either. If I'm staying with eyes wide open. Agreed. And I want us to actually try. Not as a business arrangement. As a real relationship. Therapy if we need it. Communication when things get hard. I won't raise Ji-woo in a house of people who tolerate each other. She deserves more than that. Jin-su pulled Caroline close, careful of Ji-woo between them. She deserves parents who love each other. And I do love you, Caroline. I'm not good at it. I'll probably mess it up regularly. But I love you. I love you too, Caroline whispered. Even though you're terrifying and controlling, and you don't know how to knock on doors. I'm learning to knock, Jin-su protested, and Caroline laughed. They sat in the garden as artificial sun warmed their skin, 3 people building a family from broken pieces. It wasn't traditional. It wasn't perfect. But it was theirs. There was an update on Marcus 2 months later. He'd completed the rehab program, actually completed it, and was writing letters. Caroline wasn't ready to read them yet. Maybe she never would be. But she kept them in a drawer, just in case the man her father used to be ever fully returned. 6 months after Ji-woo's birth, Caroline walked across a stage and accepted her degree in psychology and business. Jin-su sat in the audience holding their daughter, pride radiating from him, while Caroline received honors she'd never thought possible. She'd already started working as a consultant for Jin-su's legitimate businesses, implementing programs for at-risk youth and reforming employment practices. The work was hard and the changes were slow, but they were happening. Caroline had found her purpose, that thing Jin-su had asked about in the Azure Hall. She was helping people like her younger self, kids trapped by circumstances they couldn't control, giving them chances and choices. Jin-su watched her present proposals to board members now, his expression a mix of pride and amusement as powerful men twice her age scrambled to implement her suggestions. She'd become a force in her own right, respected and slightly feared. No one wanted to be on Caroline Chitter's bad side, because that meant being on Jin-su's bad side, and no one wanted that. The final scene came on an ordinary evening in the fortress garden. Caroline sat on the bench where she and Jin-su had first really talked, holding 10-month-old Ji-woo. Their daughter was starting to babble, reaching for everything, endlessly curious about the world. Caroline sang her a Korean nursery rhyme her mother had taught her, mixing in English words and making Ji-woo giggle. Jin-su appeared in the doorway, watching them with an expression that never failed to make Caroline's heart swell. He'd changed so much from the cold, calculating man who'd chosen her from a room of candidates. He still ran his empire with ruthless efficiency, but there was warmth now too. Humanity. He funded her programs, supported her initiatives, actually listened when she called him out on questionable decisions. He joined them on the bench, slipping an arm around Caroline's shoulders. Ji-woo immediately reached for her father, and Jin-su took her with practiced ease, pressing kisses to her chubby cheeks and making her shriek with delight. Think we can give her a normal life? Caroline asked, watching her daughter wave her hands enthusiastically. Jin-su considered seriously. No, normal isn't possible, not with who we are and what we've built. But we can give her a good life. We can give her love and choices and the knowledge that she comes from people who faced their darkness and chose light anyway. That's enough, Caroline agreed. They sat in their garden oasis, deep beneath Seoul, 3 people who'd found each other in the strangest circumstances. Caroline thought about the terrified girl who'd run into the rain 17 months ago, desperate and hopeless. She'd been looking for shelter from a storm. Instead, she'd found refuge of a different kind, one she'd helped build. Jiwoo babbled something that might have been mama, or might have been random sounds, and Caroline laughed. Jin-su pulled them both close, his empire of shadows and light spreading out around them. They weren't a normal family. They never would be. But they were a real family, built from broken pieces and impossible choices and love that shouldn't have existed, but did anyway. As artificial stars began twinkling in the garden ceiling, Caroline Chitara looked at her daughter and her partner and their underground kingdom, and felt something she'd never experienced before. Peace. Belonging. Home. She'd run into the Azure Hall seeking escape. She'd found everything she never knew she needed. And she'd never have to run again. If you loved Caroline's incredible journey from abuse to empowerment, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories, and drop a comment telling us what you thought. What should Caroline and Jin-su's next challenge be? Let us know below.